We are going to solve all kinds of problems using all the methods that we've learned so far. So, the different methods that we have learned are GCF, factoring, extracting a square root, completing the square, and the quadratic formula. So we're going to have to look for all the different things that we can do. So it's going to be a few steps, but we're still solving. So that means we're going to have answers such as x equals blank. So it depends on how many solutions, roots we have, will depend on how many we get. So let's look at this first one. So 4x to the fourth minus 6x squared. Everything's already solved for 0, so we want to look for a GCF. What I see is that they're both factors of 4, and they both have an x squared in them. So I would take out 4x squared. And then what I have left is an x squared minus 4. I still need to see if I can factor what's inside the parentheses because we have x squared minus 4. This is the difference of squares because this is a perfect square and so is this. So it's x plus 4, or plus 2, sorry. Let me back that up. And x minus 2 because it is the difference of squares. So now we set all our factors equal to 0 and solve, which this is going to end up being 0. So x equals 0. Then we have x plus 2 equals 0 and x minus 2 equals 0. So this one is negative 2 and this one is positive 2. So we have 3 solutions on that one. Let's go to the next one. All right, automatically I see multiples of 5. So I'm going to factor out a 5. But I also see everything has an x, and the smallest x exponent would be a 1. So 5x is going to be my GCF. And so I have an x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals 0. So now I'm going to look and see what can I do inside the parentheses. So this is where we use the x. A times c is 9, 6. So what multiplies to get 9 and adds to get 6? And that would be 3 and 3. So whenever I have a coefficient of 1 right here, I don't have to do factor by grouping. Instead, I can just use these as my numbers in the binomial. So x plus 3, x plus 3. And then I would set everything equal to 0. So x equals 0 right here. X plus 3, I actually have the same exact thing. So I just have x equals negative 3. I could write it again because it's written twice. This is my double 0 or double solution, but I only need to write it once. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, now we have x to the 4 minus 4x squared plus 3. So this has a coefficient of 1. And the only difference between this and this is the exponent is doubled. Like we have a double, so x squared is x to the 4. X is x squared. So we could actually factor it just like we factor this trinomial. So what multiplies to get 3 and adds to get negative 4? and that'd be -1, -3. So this would be x minus 1, x minus 3 equals 0. But remember, we have different exponents. So all I need to do is change this to an x squared minus 1, x squared minus 3. So this goes with that, and this one goes with that one. Very similar. The only thing different is the exponent. So I would just solve. So x squared minus 1 equals 0, and x squared minus 3 equals 0. So we would move the numbers around. We get x squared equals 1. Take the square root. So x squared equals plus minus 1, which really means x equals 1 and x equals -1. That is the solution. That is two of the solutions. Now we need to do this last equation. So we have x squared equals +3. Take the square root, and we get x equals plus minus square root of 3, which means we have x equals square root of 3 and x equals negative square root of 3. So we actually have 4 solutions on this one. So the reason I was able to say x equals 1 is because the square root of 1 is 1. So that's how I was able to actually separate it and get two different answers. Square root of 3, we can't simplify that. All right, let's look at this next one. So this is similar to that last one that we did, this one. So we are, instead of going and writing the x squared plus 2x plus 1, I'm just going to go ahead and solve it and just remember that it's x squared as your first term or your binomial. So on this one, we have what multiplies to get 1 and adds to get 2, and that'd be 1 and 1. So our magic numbers is 1. Magic numbers are 1. All right, so we have x squared plus 1 equals 0. They're the exact same, so I'm only going to do it once. We're going to move over the 1. X squared equals -1. Take the square root. Not x squared because we just took the square root, equals plus minus square root of -1 is 1i, or I. So that means x equals positive I and x equals negative I. Okay, let's look at this next one. We have some square roots, or we have 3 square root of x minus 10 equals 0. So anytime you are getting rid of like a square root or a squared, you have to get that term all alone. So I'm going to start by moving the 10 over to the other side. So 3 square root of x equals 10. Then I'm going to go ahead and divide by 3. Square root of x equals 10 over 3. And then I want it to just be x, so I do the opposite of square root, so that means I need to square both sides. So I have to actually square 10 and square 3. And we can leave it just like that. If it could be simplified, we would, but that can't be simplified. 109 have no common factors. Okay, so similar to the last one, I need to get the radical by itself. So I'm going to start by moving that 8 over. Okay, so we have a cube root this time. So the opposite of cube root is cubing something. So we're going to cube both sides. So this is now 2x plus 1 equals -8 cubed. So that means -8 times -8 times -8. So this is 64 times -8. So we would multiply that, and we get -512. Let me just make sure. 64 times 8. Yep, 512. So this is negative 512. Okay, now it's just a simple algebra 1 problem where we're solving. So minus 1, 2x equals negative 513. Divide by 2. Divide by 2. Let's not do decimals. Let's just go ahead and write it as that fraction. It can't be simplified either because that top number, the numerator, is an odd number. So we'll leave it. Okay, let's go to the next one. We're still doing the same thing. We're going to move the number that is not a radical to the other side before we try to get rid of the radical. Okay, we've got to take the square root. We have the square root, so we take a squared by both sides. 5x minus 26 equals 16, positive 16. Now solve it like an algebra problem. Algebra 1. And divide by 5. So x equals 42 over 5. Okay, let's go to the next one. All right, we don't have to move anything over. Actually, they're both square roots. So what we can do to get rid of square roots is square both sides. And that gets rid of the radical, and we only have what's left in the radical. Now it's a simple algebra 1 problem. You solve it the way that you're used to solving it. And we have x equals 0. Okay, so that is it for our practice problems. Go ahead and do the in-class problems.